Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to chat through some various different stories that are really emotional for me. Over on my main channel I'll have a video going up that talks about various different books that are really emotional, but today I wanted to zero in on the video games, shows, and manga that get me really choked up, that every single time I even think about them and think about some of those really impactful moments, it really gets me. And I'm going to start with the one that is the inspiration for this channel's very name, and that would be Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist is absolutely amazing. I feel like the first time, if you're like me and you've consumed it multiple times, the first time that you partake in this story, whether you watch the anime, and I'm specifically talking about Brotherhood, if you have only watched the anime, whether you've watched the anime or read the manga, I think the first time so much of it is kind of shocking and so much of it is so funny because there are so many funny moments that I think that the really deep moments don't quite hit you. Maybe at least it was different for your experience with it, but for me it was the second time and the third time that I really kind of was coming to the story that I got really emotional. There's various different aspects of it that get me. There's different things that will hit at different times, and that's just because there's so many phenomenal characters. There's so many great themes throughout the story. Many of you likely know the setup, but Fullmetal Alchemist follows two brothers, Edward and Alphonse, who lost their mother and they tried to bring her back from the dead using alchemy, which was forbidden and for good reason. In the process of trying to bring their mother back, Edward lost an arm and a leg, and his brother, his entire body was lost, and his soul had to be attached to a suit of armor. Now both of these brothers are in pursuit of some way to restore themselves. That synopsis though really just scratches the surface. That truly is just setup. You get so much more with these characters, and you get so many other characters introduced. You get so much to it that has to do with a feeling of home, of the people in your life that make you feel seen and loved, of trying to preserve people's innocence, of what war can do, how it can tear nations apart. You see corruption. There's so much to it that is done so exceptionally well. One of the aspects to it that really does get me is the war aspects and what violence can do to people, the things that are asked of soldiers, also the idea of revenge, the idea of compassion, of extending a hand to another person. There's just so much, and I'm sure you can think of the various scenes that go alongside what I'm discussing. I think that the Ishvalan War parts of the story are elaborated on a little bit more in the manga, and there are even certain panels that I can see really vividly. There's a character named Armstrong who is the biggest sweetheart, and when you see what he had to go through during the war and how his decisions that he had to make have affected his life in present day and things like that. Just the panels that you get with him. And then of course there's a character Winry, and there's a character Scar, and their plot lines and the imagery and the themes and the emotions of certain moments are next to none. And Fullmetal just really has it all because it's got those really deep, impactful, emotional moments. And then it has the absolutely ridiculous and silly moments as well. So it's basically perfect. I love Fullmetal so much, so I absolutely had to include it, and I had to mention it first. Switching now to a show that I absolutely love, and I was blown away by, and I think pretty much everybody else was too, and that would be Arcane. I did do a scene analysis that I think really depicts just how hard-hitting this show can be in, a 30-second clip of it, and how the imagery that they tie in and the little details that go unnoticed when you first watch it, but then if you consume it again, you're like, oh my gosh. And if you really listen to the music and how that pairs with what's going on, everything is perfection, chef's kiss in that show. I just want to watch it again, talking about it. It is so good. And when I watched it the second time, again, talking about Fullmetal, none of these you have to consume more than once to really feel it. It's just when you know things are coming, it's different. But with Arcane, similar to what I was saying about Fullmetal, there's just kind of, you're along for the ride and you're kind of shocked and there's gasp-worthy moments and you're like, what? No. And there's all those sort of up here emotions, but then it's when it settles in your gut, which I think really happens watching it again, when you know it's coming and you see the foreshadowing along the way and you know the result of certain characters and their plot lines, and you just want to keep them in a certain time to protect them, and it just hits so hard. I'm getting emotional just thinking about certain scenes. There's the one that I did the scene analysis for that has to do with the character of Victor, who is, I think, one of the... he's a character that he's a little bit more understated than some of the other ones, but his story is... it's so perfectly executed. It's done so well. And then, of course, the character of Jinx, the character of Vi, their relationship, the way that the world tears them apart, but they try to bring themselves back to each other is very well done. But there's a certain scene with Jinx and another character, and I can't even talk about it without starting to want to cry. When I rewatched the series with my mom, it was the first time she'd seen it. And she was like, "Aww." And she was like, "They were so cute." And she was getting emotional, but she was getting emotional in like a silly mom way. And I say that because it's my mom. I don't know what that would even mean to you. But my mom's very silly and cute and fun. And so she was like, "Aww." And I was like, "I'm going to go get something to drink." And I'm like walking to the kitchen, like trying to hold it together because, I'm like, don't start crying. I was just, I could like not handle it. It was so good. So yeah, Arcane, I'm trying not to get into spoilers, but it just results in me rambling and squealing about how amazing it is and how it makes me sad. But it's the best. It's so good. So yes, Arcane, it's top notch. So good. Next up, we have one that is likely the quietest of the stories on this list, and that would be Ghost of Tsushima. So we're switching now into video games. Ghost is a story that really took me off guard as far as I thought the game itself looked really fun and really, really beautiful. And then I was very pleasantly surprised when I discovered that the stories in this game are very deep. There's so much depth to them that you often don't see in video games. And not just the main quest, but some of the side quests as well. And I might as well just go ahead and let you know that the next one I'm going to mention is The Witcher 3, which I can say copy paste. I can say these exact same things for Witcher as far as the side quests go. But some of the side quests were pretty heavy, and you only get these small little moments with these side characters, but those small moments speak volumes and you feel their pain, and the game is so beautiful, and the graphics did such a great job of capturing the way in which people depict emotion, and sometimes those emotions can be anger and frustration and rage, and the way they capture that is it hits, and it hits hard. And so if you don't know the story of Ghost, we follow Japan as they are being invaded by Mongols, and we follow a fictional character who is trying to do what he can to help his country fight back. However, some of the things that he does, they go against the code of being a samurai, and his uncle is somebody who upholds these codes and cares for them very deeply, and his uncle raised him essentially as a father would. And so he has this very, very, very close relationship with his uncle, but not only do they have to unite to try to go up against the invasion of the Mongols, but then they are finding themselves butting heads because you're seeing tradition meets the new, and you're seeing the way that these forces sometimes cannot be reconciled with one another, and sometimes it can even turn those you love the most into someone that you almost feel like you're fighting up against. And so you're seeing this very intimate struggle between Jin and his uncle, while simultaneously seeing him do whatever it takes to protect his people, and he has to really question his own morality and what he really believes in order to do this. It is very well done. They do give you certain options in the game, and I feel like none of them are great. None of them are like, oh, that was a peachy ending. No matter what, these are difficult decisions that you have to make, and it's a reflection of the fact that there is oftentimes no perfect happy ending in life. It's so well done, and it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful game and so beautifully tragic at the same time. I said that I was going to go ahead and talk about Witcher next, so we'll go ahead and do that now. Not only did I mention the side quests being applicable to Witcher, but also just that sense of no decision is the perfect decision. Witcher does that probably better than any other game. It also shows the effect of war, and something that the books do really well that the video game adapted fantastically is the way in which very elite individuals make decisions that trickle down to the very, quote, bottom of society, and it is often that group of people that is affected the most. It's almost like a snowball effect. And so you just see violence around every corner. I don't feel like Witcher in any way glorifies it or makes it seem like it's cool. It really shows it for what it is, which is horrible and awful, but it does it in a world where monsters also exist, and it shows that juxtaposition of there's literal monsters, there's these creatures that are looking to do harm to human beings, but when you compare that to how human beings are, with the monsters it's almost like an instinct, it's something they can't control, but with humans we very much have the ability to control it, and then we don't. So who's really the monster after all? And those questions are I'm on repeat here, but they're done so well, and there's so many moments where you get a side quest that you were wondering, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna be following this werewolf, I suppose, and then you're like, what the heck? What is this game doing to me? Why do I care so much about this random plot line for this random monster? And it just really hits you. And then there's ridiculous moments with a woman wondering where her pan is and if Geralt's found her pan, and so there's those funny moments. There's one moment in particular, though, that doesn't really have anything to do with anything I've mentioned thus far. I'm just going to describe the scene, because if you have played it and you've gotten to that scene, you'll know what I'm talking about. Luna Bear is getting emotional if you heard her little noise there. But there's a moment where Geralt, the entire game, he has been searching for someone he cares about. And at some point, he thinks that he's come up on a dead end, I'll say. He thinks that maybe everything was for naught, and the way that the game just sort of lets that scene have its moment, I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, because Geralt is this sort of stoic, almost apathetic person, but the thing that he loves more than anything, and so seeing him almost just break down this silence that he's experiencing is very, very emotional, and I really, really, really appreciate that game. It is a reason that it is always going to be one of, in my opinion, the best games of all time. Speaking of best games of all time, and also fitting with the emotional stories, we have, of course, Final Fantasy X. I can't even hear the music without getting choked up. In fact, the other day I was like, maybe I should learn the music and I can put it all together and create this like medley, and it can be kind of fun to do leading up to the release of Final Fantasy 16. And then I started to play the Xanarkand theme and I was like, never mind. And then I had to turn it off because it's so sad. That game is so sad, and 10-2 doesn't exist, and you can't tell me otherwise. So I don't care if you get certain endings in 10-2, it does not matter. In Final Fantasy X and 10 in isolation, just by itself, is one of the most emotional stories ever. It's the most beautiful love story, and it's the most tragic love story. And these characters are just so sweet, and they're so innocent, and there's so much hope and optimism in a world that could consistently just beat them down, and they would be very justified in feeling broken. They'd be totally justified in being bitter, but they do not buckle to that pressure of the darkness in the world and the corruption in the world and all of the ways in which the world is torn apart and broken apart. They don't ever lose hope. They're always pushing, and the moment that one of them starts to maybe feel down, the other will bring them back up. And there's a sense of found family, so it's not just the characters that are part of the love story, but the other characters as well. Everybody works together to lift each other up, to push on, and to do what's best for the world. And that always gets me, because so often in any kind of a love story, it's like, screw everybody else, it's you and me. And I hate that, because I'm like, that's not romantic, that's not sweet. Screw everybody else, I don't want to be with you if that's your mindset. And these characters, it's the exact opposite. It's, we have to do what we have to do for everyone else, no matter what we want for ourselves and what we want with one another. And you see certain moments where the characters have these emotional breakdowns because they recognize that. They recognize when they think about, what if I could live a life for myself? What if I could just quote unquote be selfish and pursue the thing that would make me happy? And it makes them happy to think about, but it also makes them so sad to know that they probably can't really have that, and they can't have that knowing that potentially having that would mean never giving hope to the rest of the world, never allowing anyone else to have that. And if they can do something to bring joy and happiness to everyone else, then it's worth it for them. and it gets me every single time. And again, just the music, because the music in that game is so phenomenal, and the imagery and the colors that are used, it might be, I mean, these are all emotional and they all have various different emotional moments, but I don't know if just hearing music from any of the rest of them really makes me emotional the way that this one does. Final Fantasy X, Forever and Always, there's the nostalgia aspect too, of course, so I have to admit that, but it will always and forever be one of my favorite stories, and it's in part because of just how emotional, in both the good and the bad, as far as it's got all the sad moments and it's got the silly, happy, funny moments too. It will always be one of my favorites. That's it for some of my absolute favorite emotional stories. I would love to know what are some for you, whether they be manga, anime, TV shows, movies, or video games. I would love to know. And then, like I said, I will have a similar style video over on my main channel about some books that do similar things to me. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.